My name is Isabel. I'm 28 years old, and I've spent most of my life playing the role no one noticed. I wasn't the loud one, the rebellious one, or the brilliant golden child. I was the reliable one. The one who didn't ask for more, who quietly helped in the background while everyone else lived loudly in the spotlight. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that being overlooked was the same as being safe. I know now how wrong I was. The morning of my wedding was calm in a way that felt unnatural. The air outside the hotel window was still, almost like the world was holding its breath. My dress hung near the bed, the hem barely brushing the floor, and I stared at it for a long time before I had the courage to touch it. Everyone kept telling me how beautiful this day would be. How I deserved happiness. How proud my parents must be. I smiled and nodded and said thank you, because that's what I do. I make other people comfortable, even when I'm not. I hadn't spoken to my father in weeks. After the fight we had on my birthday, I wasn't sure he'd even show up. But when I stepped out of the dressing room, there he was. Stiff posture, dark suit, no smile. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He just stood there, as if summoned out of duty rather than love. Still, I walked toward him. I slipped my arm through his, and we stood in front of the chapel doors together, a silent pair. The coordinator gave us a gentle nod, and the doors creaked open. There they were, all of them. Faces from every chapter of my life. Classmates, coworkers, cousins I hadn't seen in years. All dressed up, eyes forward, waiting. I expected the moment to feel like a fairy tale. Instead, it felt like I was walking into a trial. The music started. Slow, classic, the kind of song that made people cry even when nothing was wrong. My heels clicked softly on the floor as we moved down the aisle. I could feel my father's arm beside mine, not warm, not supportive. Just present. Like a prop. Ethan stood at the altar, smiling like he was seeing the sun for the first time. His face was kind, open. He looked at me with eyes that said, "You're safe now." And for a brief moment, I believed him, but I kept stealing glances at my father, hoping for some flicker of affection. I got nothing. Not a glance. Not a breath. Just the hard line of his mouth and the forward stare of a man counting the seconds until this was over. We reached the altar. The priest welcomed everyone. A few guests wiped tears. The music faded. And then came the moment, the question that's supposed to be ceremonial, even sweet: who gives this woman away? I turned my head slightly, expecting to hear the words. My heart thudded in my chest. And then my father said, calm and cold, "I don't. I have no daughter." The words hit like ice water. A few people gasped. Someone dropped their program. My mother made a small choking sound, her hand rising to her mouth. I stood perfectly still. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. My mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. My father let go of my arm and walked away. Just like that. His footsteps echoed in the silence. He never looked back. I felt Ethan's hand on mine. I saw the panic in his eyes. But I couldn't move. It was as if the ground beneath me had turned to glass and one wrong breath would shatter it. That's when the woman stood up. Her movement was slow, deliberate. She wore a sleek black dress and held something in her hand, a letter, maybe, or a folded piece of paper. She looked like someone stepping out of a courtroom, not a wedding. And her voice was steady when she spoke. She deserves the truth. People turned in their seats. Some whispered. The priest looked lost. She began walking down the aisle. Each step was measured. Controlled. Her heels tapped sharply against the floor. No one tried to stop her. It was like everyone sensed this moment had been waiting to happen. When she reached the front, she didn't address the crowd. She looked only at me. "I knew your brother," she said. "And I know what really happened the night he died." I froze. A wave of nausea rolled through me. My brother Michael had died 10 years ago in a car accident, or so we were told. My family never spoke about it. The topic was off limits, a sealed vault of grief and silence. "What are you talking about?" I managed to whisper. She looked at me, eyes soft but unwavering. "He didn't die the way they said. And your father has been keeping that truth from you. From all of you." Behind me, people shifted. My mother looked like she might faint. Ethan reached out again, but I stepped back. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But more than anything, I wanted to know, because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't dared admit before. This wasn't just about my wedding. This was about every lie I had been raised to believe. The woman didn't flinch under the weight of the silence. She stood just a few feet away from me, her hands still at her sides, her eyes locked onto mine like we were the only two people left in the room. "I know this isn't the time," she said softly, her voice low but sure, "but it never would have been. That's how secrets work." Someone near the back coughed. A few guests began rising from their seats, unsure whether to leave or stay. The priest took an awkward step forward, but I held out my hand, stopping him without speaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What's your name?" I asked. Celeste, she said. Celeste Harper. I didn't recognize it. No old teacher, no distant cousin. But something in the way she said it, calm, unafraid, told me she knew she belonged here more than half the guests did. You said you knew my brother, I continued. My voice didn't shake, which surprised me. I did, she said. Very well. And then, as if those 3 words were permission, a storm of questions rose in my chest. I wanted to know what she meant. When she met him. How? Why she was here. Why she'd waited so long. Why today? Why now? But the words tangled. And instead, I just stood there, a bride with no father, no ceremony, and suddenly, no understanding of her own past. My mother stood up. Her face was pale, lips trembling. Isabel, we don't have to do this now, she said quickly. Let's go somewhere private. We'll talk. Celeste turned to her, and I swear the air changed. You've had 10 years to talk, she said. 10 years of silence. She deserves more than whispers behind doors. Ethan touched my elbow again. Maybe we should. No, I said, stepping forward. My voice was firmer now. If she came here for a reason, I want to hear it. All of it. The priest quietly stepped aside. The guests were in various stages of frozen confusion, some sitting, some standing, all unsure of whether they were still attending a wedding or watching a family unravel. Celeste took a breath. The night Michael died, it wasn't an accident. At least, not the kind they told you it was. My throat tightened. I hated how quickly my body responded, how those words felt like they had always been waiting, just under the surface. I tried to remember that night. I was 18. Michael was 22. I remembered the police at the door, my mother screaming, my father slamming it shut behind him. I remembered the vague explanations, a crash on a dark road, too fast, no one else involved. We didn't ask questions. We weren't allowed. Michael didn't die on that road, Celeste said. He was found there. But he didn't crash. He ran. Ran from what? I asked. Her eyes flicked to my mother, then to the empty aisle behind me. From someone who was supposed to protect him. My stomach twisted. You mean my father? She didn't answer. But she didn't deny it either. My mother spoke again, voice shaking. She's lying. She's trying to ruin your day. Isabel, please don't listen to her. But I was already listening. Listening harder than I ever had in my life. Celeste reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper, aged, creased, handled too many times. She handed it to me. I took it, fingers numb. Michael's handwriting. I knew it instantly. His slanted letters, his way of crossing T's too hard, the curve of his G's. The date at the top was the night before he died. It wasn't a suicide note. It was a confession. A goodbye. A warning. My knees weakened. I didn't sit. I didn't cry. I just stood there, reading the last thing my brother ever wrote. Words filled with fear, anger, and love, so much love I could barely hold the paper steady. I tried to tell the police, Celeste said. No one listened. Your father, he buried it all. He controlled everything. The priest cleared his throat, finally finding the courage to speak. Miss, if you have evidence of a crime, I did, she said. And I still do. But I came here today not for justice. For her. She deserves the truth, even if it's too late. I folded the paper and held it close. My mind was spinning. My heart ached in places I didn't know existed. I looked out over the crowd, the judgmental stares, the worried faces, the guests who came for cake and small talk, not revelations, and I realized, there was no ceremony anymore. No aisle to walk. No name to take. Not until I walked through the truth first. I held my brother's letter like it might vanish if I blinked. My fingers clutched the edges, but I couldn't bring myself to open it again. Just knowing it existed, knowing he had written to me the night before he died, made my hands shake. The guests had begun to murmur. Chairs creaked. I heard someone say my name, but I couldn't tell who. I felt Ethan beside me, motionless. Celeste stood in front of me, calm but expectant. And my mother sat rigidly in the front pew, pale as stone, her hands clenched in her lap like she might crack open at any second. I stepped away from the altar. The chapel was still quiet enough to feel sacred, but the moment had changed. This was no longer a ceremony. It was a reckoning. I moved toward the side aisle, where the afternoon light fell in thick beams through stained glass. I needed space. I needed to breathe. Celeste followed, but gave me distance. Ethan stayed behind, frozen in place. Maybe he didn't know whether he still belonged in this story. I sat on the edge of a bench, unfolded the letter again, and read, Izzy, I don't know if this will reach you. I don't know if they'll let it. But I have to try. I have to leave. And I have to tell someone why. You're the only one I trust. I stopped reading. My breath caught in my throat. No one had called me Izzy in years. Not since him. The way it softened my name, the way it belonged only to us. That single word broke something in me I hadn't known was still fragile. Celeste sat quietly a few feet away. Her hands were folded, her posture still. She wasn't pushing. She wasn't performing. She was waiting for me to ask, "How did you know him?" I asked, voice barely audible. "I met Michael in college," she said. "We were in the same ethics seminar. He was brilliant, kind, a little reckless, but always protective of the people he cared about." My eyes filled with tears. I could see it, the way he used to carry me on his back down the driveway, the way he snuck snacks into my room when I was sick. The way he stood between me and our father when things got loud. He said he had no one to talk to, she continued. That his family wouldn't understand. That he didn't want to make you choose between him and loyalty. I looked up sharply. Loyalty to what? Celeste hesitated. To the version of your father you were taught to believe in. Silence settled like dust. I didn't know the whole story until after he died, she added. And by then, it was too late. The letter wasn't supposed to go to the police. It was supposed to go to you. But your father intercepted everything. A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course he did. Celeste looked down. I kept a copy. I shouldn't have, legally. But I couldn't let it disappear. I glanced at the chapel doors. My father was long gone. I wondered if he'd driven away already, if he was somewhere safe from the shame he left behind. Or maybe he never felt shame at all. I stood slowly. What exactly happened that night? Celeste met my gaze. He came to my apartment. He was scared. He said your father had found something, a journal, or maybe just a photo, we were never sure. But whatever it was, it made him snap. Michael said he had to leave. That he couldn't stay in the house. He was afraid. The word sank into me like ice. Afraid. That wasn't how we remembered him. Not Michael. Not the big brother who once told me monsters only win if we close the closet door for them. What happened after he left? I asked. He borrowed my car. I begged him not to go alone, but he insisted. I think he planned to disappear. Start over. Maybe write to you from somewhere safe. Tears blurred my vision, and then? They found the car at the bottom of the ridge the next morning. Mangled. And him, gone. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you come sooner? Her eyes softened. I tried. But your father, he made sure no one listened. He threatened me. He called my job. He made it clear that I'd regret speaking. And now? I asked. She smiled faintly. Now, I don't care anymore. Behind us, the church remained still. A few guests had left. Others lingered, stunned or awkward or curious. But I barely noticed them now. The ceremony was long gone. The veil had lifted. All that was left was truth, raw, unedited, and burning. I'm sorry, Celeste said quietly. For how this happened. For the day it stole from you. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into the bodice of my dress, and wiped my cheeks with trembling fingers. I'm not, I said. This isn't the day I expected, but maybe it's the day I needed. I didn't return to the altar. There was no reason to. The ceremony had shattered. The veil was gone, both the one on my head and the one that had been draped over our family for years. The chapel, so meticulously decorated with white roses and soft candles, now felt like the backdrop of something unholy. A revelation disguised as a celebration. I stood in the center aisle for what felt like hours. The guests were leaving, some with whispered apologies, some without a word. I barely noticed them. They had come to witness a wedding and had found a funeral instead, not of a person, but of a lie. My mother hadn't moved. She still sat in the front pew, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor like if she just stared long enough, this would all disappear. She hadn't tried to stop Celeste. She hadn't chased after my father. She had just stayed. I walked toward her slowly, my heels echoing against the marble. She didn't look up. I sat beside her. For a moment, we were silent, then I said, "You knew." Her fingers tightened, but she didn't answer. He wrote to me, I said, staring forward. Michael. The night before he died. At that, her shoulders lifted, a tiny reaction, a held breath, but she still said nothing. You didn't destroy it, I continued. Your husband did. But you didn't stop him. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. I didn't know what was in the letter. You didn't ask. She flinched. It wasn't a jab. It was just the truth, and in this family, the truth had become the sharpest thing we had left. I was scared, she whispered. We all were. Michael wasn't scared, I said. He was brave enough to run. To write. I was the coward. I stayed. Now she turned to me. Her eyes were watery, but her expression was tired, deeply, profoundly tired. You think I didn't want to leave? I think you let him bury both of us while you smiled through it, I said. And I think you thought silence was survival. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. I'm not angry that you were afraid, I added. I'm angry that you let him make me afraid, too. Her eyes closed. You don't understand what it's like. I do, I snapped. I've lived in it. I know exactly what it's like. The walls that shift depending on his mood. The looks across dinner. The words that sound like love but feel like chains. A tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. I wanted to protect you both, she said. I just didn't know how. You let him turn Michael into a warning, I said. And me into a ghost. She covered her mouth with one hand, and for the first time in years, I saw it, the weight. The grief. The realization that she had been complicit in something monstrous, not out of cruelty but out of weakness. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I believe you, I said. But I don't forgive you. Not yet. She nodded. Slowly, I need to know everything, I said. No more lies. No more secrets. There's more, she said. Things I've never said. Things I wasn't sure you were old enough to hear. I was old enough to survive it, I said. Now I need to understand it. We sat there a while longer, in silence. It wasn't warm. It wasn't healing. But it was honest, and in our family, that was new. The chapel doors creaked open. I turned. Celeste stood there, framed in the light. Her face was calm, her presence solid. She nodded slightly. A signal. An invitation. I stood. My mother didn't try to follow. Maybe she knew this part wasn't hers to witness. I walked to Celeste. She stepped back to let me through. Outside, the sky had darkened. The wind was heavier, thicker with the scent of coming rain. The world looked different now, like someone had turned the color down, left only gray and the weight of questions. Celeste didn't speak until we reached the edge of the steps. There's something else, she said. Something you need to see. What is it? I asked. Michael left more than a letter. I stared at her. You mean? She nodded. A journal. He gave it to someone else. A friend he trusted. He told him not to come forward unless something happened. That friend reached out to me yesterday. Said he'd been holding it all this time. My breath caught. Where is it? With him. In town. He doesn't want to give it to just anyone. I'm not just anyone, I said. My voice was firmer than I expected. I'm his sister. Celeste smiled sadly. That's what I told him. A few drops of rain tapped the stone at our feet. I didn't move. I want to see it, I said. Today. We will, she promised. But I have to warn you, Isabel, once you read it, you can't unknow it. It changes. Everything. Everything's already changed, I replied. Behind me, the chapel doors shut with a deep, final thud. We left the chapel in silence, the rain following us in a quiet rhythm. Celeste drove an old blue sedan with a humming engine and a dashboard held together by tape and loyalty. I sat in the passenger seat, the letter still tucked into my dress. Pressing against my skin like a second heartbeat, the town blurred past the window, white houses with sagging porches, lawns scattered with windblown petals from someone else's wedding. Somewhere out there, my father was driving too, speeding away from the wreckage he left behind. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what he would do next. I was afraid of what I would find. Celeste gripped the wheel with one hand. Her knuckles were pale, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady. His name is Rowan. He was Michael's roommate, briefly. They kept in touch after college. When things got worse with your family, Michael trusted him. How do you know he still has it? I asked. He called me yesterday. Said he saw something in the local paper, the wedding announcement. He thought maybe it was time. I nodded. It is. We pulled onto a quiet street, narrow and tree-lined. The houses here were smaller, older, with mismatched shingles and flower beds growing wild. Celeste parked in front of a yellow home with peeling paint and wind chimes that rang hollow in the wind. Rowan answered on the second knock. He was in his 30s. Lean with graying temples and eyes that looked like they'd seen more than his age allowed. He didn't smile, but his voice was kind. You must be Isabel. I nodded. He stepped aside, and we entered a modest living room filled with books, half-drunk mugs of tea, and the faint smell of cinnamon. There was a photo of Michael on the shelf, not a formal portrait, just a moment captured in time. He was laughing, half out of frame, alive. Rowan saw me looking. That was the first day he moved in. He hated taking pictures. Said it felt like freezing someone who wasn't finished yet. I swallowed hard. He walked to a small cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out a black leather notebook, worn at the corners, pages thick with ink. He handed it to me with both hands. He made me promise, Rowan said. Only to give it to you. Not to the police. Not to his parents. You. The weight of it was shocking. It wasn't heavy, maybe half a pound, but in my hands, it felt like 1,000. Thank you, I said. He nodded once. I'm sorry for everything. I sat on the edge of the couch and opened to the first page. Michael's handwriting greeted me like a voice through static. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I felt something catch in my chest. I don't know how it happened. I hope it was clean. I hope it wasn't him. But I'm not stupid. I know what kind of house we grew up in, Izzy. I kept this for you. Because you were the only one who ever listened. You deserve to know everything, even the parts that hurt. Especially those, the words blurred. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. He found my journal 2 weeks ago. Not this one. The first one. The one where I wrote about Rowan. About you. About what I remembered from that night when he hit Mom, and she said it was a dream. About the bruises we all pretended not to see. He burned it. I came home, and it was gone. He didn't say a word, but I saw it in his eyes. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Celeste sat across from me, silent. Rowan remained standing, as if afraid to breathe too loudly. I don't want to disappear. But I don't think I have a choice. If I stay, I break. If I run, I might have a chance. And if something happens, if he makes it look like an accident, you'll have this. I closed the journal gently, my hand trembling. For a moment, I couldn't move. The silence in the room was absolute. Outside, the rain ticked against the windows like a slow, steady pulse. I didn't know, I whispered. I didn't know it was this bad. Celeste leaned forward. He didn't want you to. He thought protecting you meant hiding the worst. I clutched the journal to my chest. He should have told me. He did, Rowan said quietly. Just not soon enough. The room held us like a box, filled with the weight of unspoken grief. I had no vows now. No wedding ring. But in my hands, I held a truth more sacred than anything I'd ever known. It wasn't closure. Not yet. But it was. Something like a beginning. I didn't go back to the chapel, and I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I stood for 20 silent minutes under the inn's awning, watching the rain fall in steady lines across the windshield of a parked car. A single white ribbon from one of the pews had stuck to the sidewalk, soaked and dragging in the gutter like a lost piece of the ceremony that never was. My heels felt too tight. My chest even tighter. I had the journal pressed against my body like it might vanish if I let go. I didn't know where else to go, what else to hold. My dress was wrinkled now, dirted at the hem, the buttons loose. I didn't care. When I finally went inside, the woman behind the desk gave me a small, sad smile. The kind people wear when they're not sure if it's polite to offer condolences to a bride who was never wed. I walked upstairs slowly, like I was learning how to carry my body again. My room smelled faintly of lilacs and old wood. The bed was still made, the untouched breakfast tray from the morning resting beside the door. I dropped my bag on the chair, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the floor with the journal in my lap. I opened it again. Michael's handwriting looked different now. Not just familiar, but alive. Emotional. As if each word carried breath. I traced the ink with my fingertip, rereading lines I hadn't fully absorbed before. He burned it. I came home, and it was gone. He didn't say a word, but I saw it in his eyes. I imagined that moment, Michael walking into his room, the smell of smoke still fresh, realizing that our father had been in his things, had touched his private pages, had turned his thoughts to ash. How many times had I feared the same invasion? How many times had I hidden pieces of myself in drawers, under pillows, behind locked doors? I should have known. I should have asked more questions. But we were always trained to smile. To deflect. To survive through silence. I laid my head back against the wall. I didn't cry. I just let the silence expand until I could almost hear his voice again. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. Familiar. Hesitant. Isabel? Ethan. My stomach clenched. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. He looked like a memory, the suit rumpled, his collar damp, hair sticking to his forehead. His eyes, once full of certainty, now carried something closer to apology. And maybe confusion. I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me, he said. I'm not sure either, I replied, but I stepped aside. Let him in. He walked to the center of the room and stopped. This is the part in the movie where I say something perfect and you forgive me. This isn't a movie. I know. He rubbed the back of his neck, then sat in the armchair across from the bed. Are you okay? He asked, like it was a question that still had a simple answer. No, I said. I'm not. He nodded. Me neither. There was a long pause. The kind where you feel the weight of everything you didn't say earlier. I didn't know your brother, he said finally. I wish I had. You saw him once. His eyebrows lifted. How did you told me. Just now. He smiled. Barely. I'm not good at hiding things. I sat across from him. A lot of people weren't good at it today. That didn't stop them. He exhaled. Fair. I studied him. Why did you leave? I asked. I panicked, he said honestly. I didn't know how to be useful. Your father said something cruel. A stranger interrupted our wedding. Then I looked at you, and I didn't know if standing there made it better or worse. It would have made it better. He looked down. I needed you there, I added, voice quieter. Even if you didn't know what to say. I was scared, he said, that surprised me. Of what? Of being part of something I couldn't fix. Of watching you fall apart and not knowing how to catch you. Of saying the wrong thing. Or, worse, the right thing too late. I swallowed. I didn't need you to fix it, I said. I just needed you to stay. I'm sorry. I nodded. We sat in silence again. Outside, the rain had softened to mist. The air in the room felt thick, not with tension, but with too much space between two people who once held no space at all. I read the journal, I said. It's worse than I thought. What he went through, what he remembered, it's all in there. Every bruise we ignored. Every threat we pretended wasn't real. He looked pained. I can't imagine. No, I said. You can't. He didn't get defensive. He just sat with it. Do you still want this? He asked softly. Us? I don't know, I said honestly. Not because of you. But because I don't know who I am right now. I've been a daughter, a sister, a ghost. I need to be something else for a while. Something that belongs to me. He nodded slowly. That makes sense. You didn't do anything wrong, I added. You just didn't do anything. And I needed something. His jaw clenched. I want to be there, he said. Wherever you go from here. But I won't chase you. Thank you, I said. We both stood. I'm going to go, he said. I nodded. He walked to the door, then hesitated. I meant every word in my vows. I know, I said. That's why they still matter. Then he left, and, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I kept the lights on, the curtains half drawn, and the journal open in my lap like a portal I was afraid to walk through but couldn't stop staring into. The room was quiet except for the tick of the old clock and the occasional groan of wooden beams settling in the walls. Outside, the rain had thinned to mist, but the window still shimmered with droplets, as if the storm didn't want to let go any more than I did. Michael's handwriting had always been sharp, too sharp for a lefty. Our teachers used to joke that he stabbed his sentences instead of writing them. But these pages, they weren't just written. They were carved. Each stroke of ink felt like a held breath finally released. March 19, 2013. He asked me where I went yesterday. I said the library. He laughed. Said, don't insult me. I asked what he meant. He just said, boys like you don't read for fun. I remembered that tone, syrupy, sarcastic, slow. Our father didn't shout. He didn't have to. He could break you with a whisper, with a look. It was always about humiliation, not punishment. I turned the page. April 2nd. I think he followed me. I felt it. That buzz on the back of your neck, the way your spine tightens even when the room is empty. I saw his truck 2 blocks from Rowan's. Parked and waiting. I pictured Michael walking home, checking over his shoulder every few steps, trying to pretend that the fear was in his head. We both used to do that. Pretend. Not out of denial, out of necessity. I started sleeping at Celeste's. I don't think she knows why. I told her the water at my place was out. That wasn't a lie, exactly. Just not the whole story. I paused. Celeste. The woman who had stood up in front of everyone, risking humiliation, rejection, or worse, simply because she had loved him enough to protect what he couldn't. How many nights had he knocked on her door without saying the real reason? How many nights had she let him in without asking? I flipped another page. You were 12 when you told me you had a nightmare and didn't want to go to bed. I told you monsters weren't real. I lied. I didn't know how to tell you that sometimes. The monsters live down the hall, and they wear your last name. That one broke me. I curled deeper into the blankets, the journal held to my chest like armor, and let the tears fall freely. Not sobbing. Not broken. Just slow, steady grief. The kind that sneaks in through the floorboards and makes itself at home. I kept reading. The entries were fragmented. Some were full paragraphs. Others just lines. She found my bruises once. Asked if I fell. I said yes. We both knew I was lying. She said nothing. He unplugged my phone when I was out. Said it was acting up. My messages were gone when I checked. Again. I had a dream where I came back as someone else. I was taller. Stronger. Invisible to him. I think that means I still have hope. Or maybe it just means I'm not ready to die. There were drawings between the entries, small ones. A burning tree. A bird with clipped wings. A silhouette at the bottom of a stairwell. Every image felt like it had been scratched and during a panic, desperate to trap something that words couldn't carry alone. Then I found it, the first mention of me by name, not just Izzy. Isabel looked at me today like she still believes I'm unbreakable. I almost cried. Not because she's wrong, but because she might be right. I've just been broken for so long I forgot what whole used to feel like. I pressed my hand against that page. How long had I walked past him in that house? How often had I smiled, said good night, and gone to bed thinking he was fine. Thinking I was fine, I turned to the final cluster of pages. The last week. The days before he disappeared, each one more desperate. He cornered me. Told me I was a disgrace. That if I ever embarrassed him publicly, he'd make sure no one remembered me kindly. Mom heard. She walked away. Celeste said I should go to the police. But what do I say? That I'm scared of my own father? That I don't know how many more days I can stay quiet, if anything happens, if they say I was reckless, or high, or running from something. Remember this, I wasn't running. I was choosing. Choosing to try. Choosing to live somewhere that didn't call me weak for bleeding. I couldn't breathe. I stood up, walked to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face, but the pressure in my chest didn't ease. I saw us as kids. Building forts out of couch cushions. Taking turns pretending the kitchen tiles were lava. Laughing without weight, and I saw what came after, the years where our voices lowered, our backs straightened, our smiles became rehearsals. I returned to the bed, sat cross-legged, and opened to the last entry again. If she's reading this, it means I didn't make it. But that doesn't mean I lost. It means I passed the story to someone braver. I hope you tell it. Not for me. For the next kid who thinks monsters can't be real. Let them know, they're real. But so are we. I closed the journal and held it to my chest. My grief wasn't clean. It wasn't poetic. It was jagged and confusing and full of rage I didn't know where to put. But beneath all that, for the first time, there was clarity. He had trusted me. Not just with the truth. With his voice, and now it was mine. The sun came up while I was still awake. I hadn't slept, not out of fear, not even grief anymore, but a strange kind of alertness. Like something inside me had been switched on and couldn't be turned back off. The room was silent, but I wasn't. My thoughts moved with a steady rhythm, slow and full, like the tide pulling everything I'd ever buried to the surface. The journal sat beside me on the bed, closed now, but somehow louder than when it was open. I kept hearing his words. Let them know, they're real. But so are we. I showered slowly, not to erase anything, but to mark the shift. The morning felt like something sacred. I dried my hair, dressed plainly, jeans, a soft gray sweater, and packed Michael's journal into my canvas bag like it was made of glass. Before I left the room, I looked around once more. Not for anything I'd forgotten, but because I had entered this room as one version of myself, a silenced daughter, a ghost of someone else's story, and now I was walking out different. Still bruised, still uncertain, but no longer small. The cafe Celeste chose was old, quiet, and smelled like burnt sugar. The kind of place that held secrets in the wood grain of the tables. I spotted her immediately, hunched slightly, hands around a chipped mug. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, but she didn't smile. There wasn't space for it yet. I slid into the seat across from her. You came, she said. I needed to. She nodded. You read it all? I placed the journal gently on the table and ran my hand across the cover. Every word. She looked away, blinking hard. And I saw him, I said. Like I hadn't in years. Like I'd forgotten how much of himself he was still holding together. He wanted to tell you. I know. And I think he did. In the only way he could. She touched the corner of the journal. I used to tell him he was made of wire and sunlight. Sharp but glowing. He'd laugh, but I think it stayed with him. I felt something tighten in my chest. He wrote about you, I said. Not often. But clearly. Celeste's eyes filled, and she nodded without speaking. He said you were the first person who didn't pity him. I didn't, she whispered. I loved him. I think you saved him, more than once. She breathed deeply. It wasn't enough. No, I said. But it was something. And he knew that. We sat in quiet a while. The cafe's other patrons came and went like slow ghosts, teachers grabbing coffee, a man in overalls reading a newspaper, two kids on stools sharing a muffin without speaking. I want to tell his story, I said suddenly. Celeste looked up. How? I don't know yet. But I know it can't stay inside this journal forever. It's too loud. Too full of breath and blood. People need to know he was here. That he mattered. You're not afraid? She asked. I'm terrified, I said. But it doesn't matter. Celeste nodded slowly. What will your family say? They've had their turn, I said. They told their version for 10 years. Now it's mine. She reached out. Placed her hand over mine. Whatever you do, I'll stand with you. Outside, the sky was soft and silver. We stepped out together, the wind brushing against our coats. I didn't say goodbye. She didn't offer advice. There was nothing left to explain. We had spoken the same language now, the language of people who had lost someone and refused to let them disappear. I walked, not to think, not to wander, but to arrive. Every block I passed carried some version of the past. The park where Michael taught me to throw a football. The bus stop where I used to wait for him after detention. The cracked sidewalk near the corner of Walnut and 8th where he told me not to cry when I scraped my knee. He had always shown up for me, even when he couldn't for himself, and now it was my turn. My mother's house hadn't changed. Same blue shutters, same overgrown roses trying to climb the railing. I stood in front of it longer than I meant to, my heart thudding quietly. Not in fear, in memory. I walked up the steps, the door opened before I could knock. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her face was bare, her sweater buttoned unevenly, her hair pulled back in a way that said she'd stopped caring what anyone thought. But her eyes, they were wide, wet, and unsure. Isabel. I need to talk to you, I said. She stepped aside. I entered. The house smelled the same, cinnamon and lemon polish and something faintly floral. But it felt different. Smaller. More fragile. Like it knew I was here to say something it could no longer keep quiet. We sat at the table. I placed the journal between us. I read it all. She didn't touch it. Just stared. I'm not here to blame you, I said. Not only that. Her lips trembled. I loved him. You loved a version of him you could manage, I said. He needed more than that. She nodded slowly. I'm going to talk, I said. Publicly. About everything. About him. About Dad. About what it was like to grow up here. She closed her eyes. A single tear slipped down her cheek. I won't stop you, she said. I didn't ask for permission. I know. I stood. She didn't, but before I left, she whispered, make them hear it. I looked at her for a long moment. I will, I said, and I meant it. It took me 3 days to write the first sentence, not because I didn't know what to say, I did. I had too much to say. That was the problem. Too many words. Too many memories that refused to sit still long enough to be tamed. But when I finally sat at my desk, stared at the blinking cursor in that blank document, I knew the first line had to be honest. Unapologetic. So I wrote, my brother didn't die in a car crash. He died in our house, long before the crash ever happened, and the moment I wrote it, my hands began to shake. I pushed back from the desk and stood up, pacing the room. The walls felt too close. The air too thick. But I didn't delete it. I didn't second guess it. I let it sit there, one blinking breath at a time, and forced myself to keep going. Every paragraph that followed was like tearing open an old wound, raw, familiar, dangerous. But it was also something else, freeing. I wrote about the bruises. Michael never explained. The nights I found him staring at the ceiling, unmoving. The times our father's voice turned to thunder in the hallway. The long silences over dinner. The way our mother looked away every time something ugly entered the room. And then I wrote about the good things. His stories. His kindness. The way he made me feel safe when the world didn't. The time he walked me home in the snow with no shoes because mine had split. The way he called me Izzy even when I tried to outgrow it. When I finished the first draft, it was almost midnight. I didn't sleep. I reread it 3 times. I cried once. And then I hit send. I had emailed it to a local journalist, someone who had written about community tragedies and quietly investigated the cracks under small-town perfection. We had never met, but I had read his work. And I knew he listened. The next morning, he called me. I read your piece, he said. Are you sure you want this out there? Yes. There'll be backlash. I know. There might also be justice. I didn't reply. He said he would run it next Sunday, and just like that, the secret stopped being mine. The days that followed were quiet. I stayed mostly inside, writing more, sorting through photos, scanning old documents. Celeste visited once. She brought tea in silence, which was exactly what I needed. We didn't talk about Michael. We just sat on the floor, backs against the couch, breathing in the same room. My mother called but didn't leave a message. I didn't call back. There was nothing left to say right now. She had handed me the story. Now it was mine to speak. On Friday, I received an email from Ethan. Subject: just read your piece, Isabel. You don't need me to say this, but I will anyway. I'm proud of you. You did something hard and necessary. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No pressure. No expectations. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. That night, I took Michael's journal and placed it gently on the shelf above my desk, not hidden, not displayed, just present. And I opened a new document. Not about him. About me. For the first time, I was writing something I didn't owe to anyone else. Sunday came with rain. I didn't buy the paper. I didn't need to. By noon, my phone was full of messages. Some from classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. A former teacher. A neighbor. 2 people from town who said they had always felt something was off. One message from someone I didn't know, just a single sentence: he mattered. Thank you for saying it. I cried again, not the way I had cried before, not from grief. This was something quieter. Something closer to peace. I walked to the edge of town that afternoon, to the field behind the high school where Michael and I once flew a kite we made from trash bags and broomsticks. It never got more than 10 feet off the ground, but he swore it touched the clouds. I stood there a long time, arms crossed, coat zipped tight. The wind was colder now. Winter was coming. But I wasn't afraid of it. I closed my eyes and said his name out loud. Once. Softly, just enough to hear it echo back through the air, and I smiled. After the article was published, the world didn't explode. No buildings crumbled, no names were carved in stone. But something shifted, in me, in them, in the quiet space between what is said and what is kept. People reached out. Some with warmth. Some with fury. A high school teacher wrote to say she remembered Michael's silence. That she wondered back then but didn't ask. An old neighbor apologized for the years she dismissed his sadness as shyness. One of the boys who used to tease him on the playground sent a message that said, "I'm sorry. I wish I'd seen you." Just that. Others were harsher. Anonymous comments accusing me of digging up pain for attention. Some said I should have left it alone, let the dead rest. But Michael never rested. Not truly. Not while his story stayed buried with him. I didn't reply to any of it. I didn't need to. The words had done what they were meant to do, they gave him back a voice. It wasn't long before I got a message from Rowan. "We should do something for him," she wrote. "Not a funeral. Just something right." Celeste offered the field behind the high school, the place Michael once claimed was his favorite spot in town. A place where the wind felt wide and sky met the grass without judgment. We gathered that Sunday. No microphones. No speeches. Just us, the ones who loved him, the ones who understood now what we hadn't back then. Each person brought a candle. We lit them one by one, forming a small circle of light under a gray sky. Celeste handed me a folded note. "He wrote this the week before the end." I opened it slowly. His handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. The note didn't say much. Just one line: "I hope one day someone understands why I stopped asking to be seen." It hit harder than any scream could have. I read it aloud. No one cried, we had cried enough. But we all stood there, in silence, feeling the weight of those words settle into the soil beneath our feet. That night, I took the long road home. I passed every place that held pieces of him. The corner store where he bought candy with coins. The park bench where he once told me he wanted to be invisible. The bridge where we used to play with shadows. I stopped there. The river below was loud, alive, uncaring. I pulled the original copy of my article from my coat pocket. I had kept it untouched, folded neatly like something sacred. I read it again. Not to remember, but to remind myself I had done it. That I had chosen truth over silence. Then I wrote something on the bottom. Just a sentence: he was real. He mattered. And so do I. I let the paper fall into the river. It drifted, slow at first, then was caught by the current and swept away. For a moment, I closed my eyes. And when I opened them, I felt something shift. Not peace. Not forgiveness. But presence. A feeling that he was no longer hidden, not by them, not by me. 2 days later, I visited my mother. I didn't go to argue. I went to end the echo of unanswered things. She opened the door without surprise. "You wrote it well," she said, sitting down. "I didn't write it for approval." "I know." She looked smaller somehow, as if grief had carved her into something quieter. We sat at the same table. No tea. No stories. Just stillness. She handed me a small wooden box. "He left this." I was afraid to open it. Inside was his watch, the one he wound every Sunday night. Still ticking. I nodded. "Thank you." She didn't ask for absolution. I didn't offer it. We weren't there for that. Some silences don't get broken. They just end. As I stood to leave, she spoke. "Do you think he forgives me?" I paused. "I think he just wanted to be remembered." She looked down. And I left. That night, I recorded my voice for the first time. Not in an interview, not for press. Just me, alone, speaking into the dark. "My name is Isabel," I said. "And I have a brother. His name was Michael." I said his name again and again, until it no longer hurt, until it felt like something alive. They say telling the truth doesn't bring back the dead. That's true, but it brings back the living. If you've carried a silence like mine, don't keep it caged. Speak it. Even if your voice shakes. Even if it breaks something, because some stories don't ask to be told, they demand it. And if this story stirred something in you, even quietly, then stay with us. There are more truths waiting. If you felt something here, don't let it fade. Subscribe to Twilight Revenge and pass it on. Because silence never protects. But stories might.